Before you take the first bite out of your hot dog bun, have you ever wondered what makes it taste so delicious? Well, the real answer lies in the drizzle of mustard sauce covering the hot dog. The sole reason for that unique, tangy flavor mixed with sweet and spicy undertones. Every hot dog is incomplete without its signature mustard sauce balancing the flavor profiles. But what gives mustard sauce its sharp flavor? Today at Whole Process, we're taking a look behind the scenes at the manufacturing process, how it changes the mustard seeds to an irresistible topping, older than ketchup itself. But why has mustard reached such heights of popularity? What is its secret in the culinary world? If you think it's a recent fascination, you'd be wrong. Mustard seeds were used back in ancient Rome and even medieval Europe. In Rome, the seeds were mixed with unfermented grape juice to form a paste called mustum. In fact, by the Middle Ages, mustard had become a prized condiment across France and England. It was valued not just for taste, but also because it masked the flavors of preserved meats before refrigeration. In 1856, mustard makers in Dijon, France, swapped vinegar for verjuice, the juice of unripe grapes, creating the smoother, sharper Dijon mustard we know today. This cemented Dijon as the capital of mustard. While in Europe, mustard was considered almost as valuable as pepper. Some royal courts even kept it in their kitchens as a sign of wealth. While ancient civilization used mustard for its flavor, it was also preferred due to its medicinal benefits at the time. The turning point in its image came in 1904, when mustard managed to take the center stage at baseball events, where hot dog stands started to flourish. George J. French introduced his bright yellow cream salad mustard at the St. Louis World's Fair, which later became an American ballpark staple, prized for its use in hot dogs, burgers, and more as a condiment that added a sharp kick to any of the fast foods it was added to. But how do these tiny seeds transform into that smooth, golden yellow spread? The journey of the mustard seed begins when it germinates deep in the soils of diverse countries like. Major producers of mustard seeds include India, Pakistan, Canada, Nepal, Hungary, Great Britain, and the United States. All of these places have one thing in common, and that's their temperate climate, which sits as ideal for mustard seeds. The plant of its origin belongs to the Brassica family and is directly related to common household vegetables you're probably familiar with, cabbage and broccoli. These seeds don't just come in one form, instead there are yellow/black and brown varieties present. For hot dog mustard, the type used is usually yellow mustard and it's made from white and yellow mustard seeds. However, the sauce gets its extremely bright yellow color from something else. Stick around and you'll find out. Mechanical seeders are used to deposit at exact depth in rows. Controlled airflow, Saint Dirtilizier, shallow depth. Early July, it becomes flowering time. Late summer and early August, it matures. On average, mustard plants take about 90 to 120 days from plantation to reaching full maturity, with the average plant height reaching around 2 to 4 feet. Once it's time for harvest, the leaves begin yellowing and drying, and their pods turn from a vibrant green to a light brown. This is important. So to ensure that farmers aren't messing up the timelines, they aim to harvest the pods when they have turned 30 to 40% brown. The seeds inside the pod turn hard and change color depending on the variety, as we mentioned above. And the biggest signal for their maturity is when the pods are shaken, they produce a rattling sound. The reason we mentioned this part as being important is that if these signs are ignored and the seeds are harvested too early, the yield is very soft and has a poor flavor. On the flip side, if the harvesting takes too long, the pods will shatter too easily and will lead to a loss in the seeds since they will fall out. They also make sure that the weather conditions are favorable and target dry days over rainy ones, as rain can shatter the pods and even risk mold growth. There are a multitude of methods used to harvest the seeds, with the older one usually involving the use of sickles and cutting the pods off by hand. While in more modern farms, they use specialized machinery. These harvester machines are used mainly in countries like Canada, Europe, and the US. with the biggest advantage being how they increase efficiency and reduce the amount of seeds lost. After the pods have been collected, they get bundled up in bunches and left in the sun for days to complete the rest of the drying process. Once this is done, the dried pods are beaten hard against hard surfaces or even trampled to crack open the pods. Here, a new process enters the stage: threshing. It combines the use of rotating cylinders and sieves to separate seeds from the plant matter, and then these precious seeds are collected in hoppers or bags, waiting to be created into our favorite golden spread of tanginess. Though that's not quite where our journey ends. In fact, it's the beginning. The seeds are sifted to remove the pod fragments, stems, and even dust left behind from the threshing process. Undersized and broken seeds are also removed. The seeds are passed through air blowers and vibrating screens to achieve this. When it comes to food-grade usage, like the making of mustard sauce from the seeds go through an additional process in which they get washed or treated to remove any dirt and impurities that may have slipped in, ensuring that they are fit for human consumption. Though that's not the only thing they need to ensure. At this stage, the seeds are very delicate and need to be properly stored to avoid spoilage and mold. In fact, with such conditions, the seeds can also sprout and end up losing flavor quality. The best method is to initially dry them to about 9% moisture levels by spreading them out in thin layers under the sun or drying them in mechanical dryers in industrial settings. From here, they get shipped off to get stored in temperature-monitored silos or warehouses until they are needed. Eventually, when the time for grinding comes, the seeds are transported to the mustard factories for it, and that is the recipe blending part. Only after this integral stage does the transformation to the revered mustard paste take form. The seeds are crushed into a powder or paste form, using either stone mills or mechanical grinders, and this is done depending on the recipe type. When it comes to the processing of the seeds, there's actually a subtle chemistry that goes on behind closed doors. Whole mustard doesn't take on its strong flavor until the seeds are completely crushed. The process releases myrosinase, which reacts with compounds in the seed, glucosinolates, to create isothiocyanates. This leads to the strong mustard flavor we would have missed out on if we skipped the crushing process. The main reason mustard has that unique, pungent, nose-tingling taste. Once the mustard has been ground to a fine, thin paste, it gets combined in a harmonic mix with vinegar, water, salt, and a secret ingredient that we mentioned earlier that gives it its yellow color. Can you guess which one it is? Turmeric. It's used to bring that iconic bright yellow to life. It's extremely important that the ratio and choice of ingredients is kept consistent because it ultimately decides and defines the final flavor profiling. Afterwards, the mixture is allowed to sit undisturbed so that the flavors can develop. In some industrial practices, mustards are left to age in large vats. However, in the case of our yellow mustard, this part is skipped. Why? Yellow mustard tends to be processed faster so as to conserve the freshness of its individualistic flavor. While it may seem like all of the heavy lifting is done, the real difficulty seems to take reign at this point. Did you ever wonder why mustards can be both mild or spicy? The reasoning behind this phenomenon of alternating flavors lies in the temperature of the water used during the mixing process. When the mixture is mixed with cold water, the reaction stays active longer, producing a spicier, more pungent flavor. That's why English mustard or Chinese mustard can really sting the nose. However, if instead of water vinegar is used, the flavor turns out to be more milder. This is due to the fact that vinegar happens to halt the reaction earlier and creates a softer tasting mustard. American yellow mustard follows this route, and that's why it tastes more consistent throughout. After all this is done, the final mustard mixture is heated to stabilize the product and simultaneously kill any bacterial pathogens, in effect, extending the shelf life of the mustard. Now that our mustard has come to life, we move on to the final step, the packaging. Squeeze bottles or glass jars, depending on the manufacturer, get arranged on the factory lines in perfect rows. In modern facilities, the advent of mechanized and automated filling machines has made this historically long and pressing process much faster. The bottles simply pass under the nozzles and get aligned accurately thanks to the markers on the lines. Once the nozzles detect the bottles, they go ahead and fill them to the predetermined and programmed level. Once filled, the bottles move on the sealing station and get capped up to prevent spoilage. You would think that's the end of this story, but you'd be wrong. Here they get their first sense of identity. Yes, the company that manufactures the mustard adds their labels and logos, which also include their barcodes that specify their manufacturer and expiry dates. Finally, they then get sorted into their specific batches and packed into boxes for shipment, ready for their international and national departures. These large pallets then travel across the country to get stocked in grocery stores and aisles in your vicinity, allowing you to access them whenever you crave a homemade hot dog with the traditional drizzle of mustard on top. The journey of mustard is surprisingly complex, from factory lines to the cool embrace of your fridge's embrace. To think that such a tiny mustard seed could be turned into something so delicious and become an integral part of hot dog culture all over the world is crazy in of itself. Do you eat mustard on your hot dogs? Or perhaps you're the type to enjoy Dijon or spicy brown mustard. Regardless of your pick, every squeeze of the bottle carries centuries of history, packed in one bottle. If you enjoy these kinds of videos, remember to subscribe so we can keep making them. Thank you for watching, and as always, see you next time.